Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Historytime English. It is so good to have you here with me today. Find a comfortable spot. Take a slow, deep breath. And let this story carry you across the centuries to places you have never been. Now, before we begin, let me ask you something simple. Think about what you ate today. Your breakfast, your lunch, a snack, a drink. Can you guess how many of those things contained sugar? The answer might surprise you. Sugar is in your bread. It is in your sauce. It is in your juice, your cereal, your yogurt. It hides in places you would never expect. Today, the average person eats more sugar in 2 weeks than a person 200 years ago ate in an entire year. But sugar was not always so common. There was a time when sugar was as rare and expensive as gold. Kings locked it away in special rooms. Doctors prescribed it as medicine. Wars were fought over it, and millions of people suffered and died because of it. This is the story of sugar. And I must warn you, my friend, it is not as sweet as you might think. Our story begins more than 10,000 years ago, on a large tropical island in the warm waters of the Pacific Ocean. This island is called New Guinea. It lies just north of Australia, in a part of the world where the air is hot and wet, and green plants grow thick and tall. The people who lived on this island discovered something wonderful. Growing wild among the other plants was a tall grass with a thick stem. If you broke the stem and chewed it, something magical happened. A sweet juice filled your mouth. Sweet like honey, sweet like ripe fruit, but somehow different, somehow more. This tall grass was sugarcane. And for thousands of years, the people of New Guinea simply chewed it. They did not cook it. They did not change it. They just enjoyed the sweetness as it was, straight from the ground. Slowly, over many centuries, sugarcane traveled. Traders and travelers carried it from island to island, across the warm seas of Southeast Asia. It reached the Philippines, Indonesia, and eventually, the great land of India. And it was in India, about 2,500 years ago, that something remarkable happened. Something that would change the course of history. The people of India discovered how to boil the juice from the sugarcane and turn it into small, hard crystals. For the first time in human history, sweetness could be held in your hand. It could be stored. It could be carried across mountains and deserts. It could be traded. They gave these crystals a name in their ancient language, Sanskrit. They called them sharkara, a word that meant something like small stones or gravel. Say it slowly, sharkara. Can you hear it? Over the centuries, that word would travel across languages and across the world. Sharkara became sukar in Arabic, sucre in French, zucker in German, sugar in English. One word, one idea, carried across thousands of years. The people of India also had a beautiful name for the sugarcane plant itself. They called it the reed that gives honey without bees. Is that not a lovely thought? A plant that could make sweetness all by itself, with no help from any creature. In ancient India, sugar was precious. It was used as medicine. Doctors mixed it into drinks to help the sick. It was offered at temples. It was given as a gift between kings. But it was rare and expensive. Only the wealthy could taste it regularly. For a long time, the rest of the world did not know about sugar. But stories travel, and so do soldiers. When the armies of Alexander the Great marched into India, around 327 BCE, his soldiers saw the sugarcane fields for the first time. They wrote home about this incredible plant, a reed that produced honey without bees. The news spread slowly westward, carried by traders along the ancient roads that connected east and west. But it was the great Arab civilization that truly unlocked sugar's power. After the Arab conquests spread across Persia and into parts of India in the 7th century, Arab scientists and farmers learned how to grow sugarcane and refine the crystals. They built the first sugar mills. They developed new ways to make sugar whiter and purer. And they planted sugarcane everywhere their empire reached, in Egypt, across North Africa, and into Spain. The Arabs turned sugar into an art. They made sweets and pastries that had never existed before. They created delicate candy, flavored drinks, and beautiful desserts that astonished anyone who tasted them. They flavored their medicines with it. They wrote about it in their scientific books. Visitors from other lands who tasted Arab sweets, for the first time, could hardly believe what they were eating. Nothing in their own countries compared to this. For the first time, sugar was being produced on a large scale. But even so, it remained a luxury. It traveled along trade routes on the backs of camels, wrapped carefully like treasure. It was not yet a food for ordinary people. And then came the moment when Europe discovered sugar. And nothing would ever be the same. European soldiers who traveled to the Middle East during the Crusades, the religious wars of the 11th and 12th centuries, tasted sugar for the first time. They called it the sweet salt from the East. They could hardly believe such a thing existed. Nothing in Europe tasted like this. When they returned home, they brought sugar with them. And the people of Europe fell in love with it immediately. But there was a problem. Sugarcane could not grow in the cold fields of England, France, or Germany. It needed warm, tropical weather. So all the sugar in Europe had to be imported, brought in from far away at enormous cost. And because it was so rare, sugar became incredibly expensive. In medieval Europe, sugar was sold not in shops, but in apothecaries. An apothecary was the old name for a medicine shop. Sugar was measured by the ounce, like a precious metal. People called it white gold. Only kings, queens, and the very wealthiest nobles could afford it. If a rich family wanted to show off their power at a grand dinner, they would display sculptures made entirely from sugar at the center of the table, not to eat, but to admire, to prove that they were wealthy enough to waste this precious substance. Doctors prescribed sugar as medicine for almost everything. Sore throat? Sugar. Stomach pain? Sugar. Tired eyes? Sugar. It was treated almost like a magical cure, a spoonful of white gold to make everything better. For centuries, this was the life of sugar in Europe. Precious, rare, and beautiful. Something that ordinary people could only dream about. But everything was about to change, because on the other side of the ocean, a new world was waiting. In 1493, on his second voyage across the Atlantic, Christopher Columbus carried something in his ships besides soldiers and supplies. He carried sugarcane cuttings, small pieces of the plant, ready to be pushed into the warm soil of the Caribbean islands. And the sugarcane loved it there. The Caribbean had everything the plant needed: burning sun, heavy rain, and rich, dark soil. The cane grew faster and taller than anyone had ever seen. European colonists quickly realized that these islands could produce sugar in quantities the world had never known. Within a few decades, sugar plantations covered the islands. Hispaniola, Jamaica, Barbados, Cuba, island after island was cleared and planted with sugarcane. The forests were cut down. The land was transformed. Every piece of earth was used for one purpose, and one purpose only: to grow sugar. But growing and harvesting sugarcane was brutally hard work. The cane had to be cut by hand, under the burning tropical sun. The juice had to be boiled in enormous pots over roaring fires. The heat inside the boiling houses was unbearable. The work was dangerous, exhausting, and endless. And here, my friend, our story reaches its darkest chapter. A chapter that we must not look away from. The European plantation owners needed workers, huge numbers of workers. And they found their answer in one of the greatest crimes in human history. They turned to the continent of Africa. Over the course of more than 300 years, millions of African men, women, and children were taken from their homes by force. They were chained together, packed into the dark holds of ships, and carried across the Atlantic Ocean. Many did not survive the terrible journey. Those who did were sold and forced to work on the sugar plantations. This was slavery, and sugar was at the very heart of it. The conditions on the plantations were beyond cruel. Enslaved people worked from before sunrise until after dark. They were beaten. They were starved. They were treated not as human beings, but as tools, things to be used and replaced. On many sugar plantations, an enslaved person was expected to survive only 7 years. 7 years of suffering under the burning sun before their body gave out. Think about that for a moment. Behind every spoonful of sugar that sweetened a cup of tea in a London parlor, there was suffering that most people across the ocean never saw and never wanted to see. A terrible system grew around this cruelty. Historians call it the triangle trade. Ships carried European goods, cloth, guns, and metal to the coast of Africa. There, those goods were exchanged for enslaved people. The ships then carried their human cargo across the ocean to the Caribbean. And from the Caribbean, the ships returned to Europe loaded with sugar, rum, and profit. A triangle of trade, a triangle of pain. Sugar made the European empires rich beyond imagination. Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands all fought wars over the tiny islands of the Caribbean. These small pieces of land, barely visible on a map, were worth more to their owners than vast territories on the mainland. One small island covered in sugarcane could generate more wealth than an entire province. And so the world's sweetest taste was built on its greatest bitterness. But change was coming. Slowly, painfully, people began to speak out. In the late 1700s, a movement grew in Britain to abolish slavery, to end it completely and forever. Abolish means to officially stop a system or practice. People who had never seen a plantation began to learn the truth about where their sugar came from. Some refused to buy sugar from slave plantations. They called it blood sugar. And on the island of Haiti, once France's richest colony, built entirely on sugar and slavery, the enslaved people rose up. In 1791, they began a revolution that would last 13 years. They fought against one of the most powerful armies in the world, and they won. Haiti became the first nation in history founded by formerly enslaved people. In 1807, Britain banned the slave trade. In 1833, slavery itself was abolished across the British Empire. Other countries followed, slowly. France, the Netherlands, the United States, Brazil. One by one, the chains were broken. The last country in the Americas to end slavery was Brazil in 1888. The long, dark chapter was ending, but it had lasted for more than 3 centuries, and its scars remain to this day. Meanwhile, sugar itself was changing too. In the early 1800s, scientists in Europe discovered that sugar could also be made from a humble plant that grew easily in cold climates, the sugar beet. Suddenly, Europe did not need tropical plantations to produce sugar. Factories were built across the countryside. Sugar became cheaper year by year, and for the first time in history, ordinary people could afford to eat sugar every day. It moved from the locked cabinets of kings to the kitchen tables of working families. In Britain, tea with sugar became the daily drink of millions. Factory workers drank sweet tea for energy during long, exhausting shifts. Sugar was cheap, available, and everywhere. By the end of the 1800s, sugar had completed its long transformation. The substance that had once been locked in the treasure rooms of kings was now piled high in the cupboards of ordinary homes. It was no longer white gold. It was simply part of daily life, and most people had already forgotten that it had ever been anything else. And today? Today, sugar surrounds us in ways we can barely see. It is in your soft drinks. It is in your bread. It is in your ketchup, your cereal, your frozen meals. It hides under dozens of different names on ingredient labels. The average person now consumes more than 30 kilograms of sugar every year. 30 kilograms. That is the weight of a small child. In sugar, every single year. Doctors now warn us that too much sugar is dangerous. It can lead to serious health problems. The substance that was once so rare that only kings could taste it is now so common that we struggle to avoid it. Is that not a strange thought? For thousands of years, people dreamed of sweetness, and now that we have all the sweetness we could ever want, we are learning that too much of it can harm us. And so, my friend, the journey of sugar comes gently to its close. Think about everything this simple substance has lived through. It was discovered by ancient people chewing a wild grass on a tropical island. It was crystallized by the brilliant minds of India. It was perfected by Arab scientists. It was treasured by European kings. It crossed the ocean and covered the Caribbean in green. And it was soaked in the suffering of millions of people who never tasted its sweetness for themselves. Sugar's story is a story about desire, about what we want so badly that we are willing to do almost anything to get it. It is sweet and it is bitter, all at once. Now, here is what I want you to remember. Learning English can sometimes feel like sugar's journey. There are sweet moments, when a sentence suddenly makes sense, when a word you learned comes back to you at just the right time, when you understand a whole story without stopping. Those moments are wonderful. Hold on to them. But there are harder moments too. Days when nothing seems to stick. Days when you feel lost. Days when the words will not come. My friend, that is part of the journey. The sweetness means more because of the effort. Every story you listen to, every new word you learn, every minute you spend with this language, it is all building something inside you, something strong, something lasting. And one day, you will look back and realize that every difficult moment was part of something beautiful. Keep going. Keep listening. Keep tasting the words. This is Historytime English. Tell me, my friend, in the comments below, what surprised you most about the story of sugar? Was it the white gold of medieval Europe, the triangle trade, or the sugar hiding in your food today? I would truly love to hear from you. There are many more stories waiting for you right here, and I will be here when you come back. Until next time, take care of yourself and never stop learning.